pushing this water onto us just to make us go for another high-level dam in Kindred and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's all they're doing. If they would put a dry dam in Kindred and Lisbon and
No.
Cooperstown, control the flood, the drainage, I mean, we'd be all right.
No, when we get
All set, Annie?
rain in the basement, it's because of the, raining,
Oh.
the water level
Uh-huh.
comes up.
And you're up on the ridge here.
Yeah, so it takes a lot, before we.
One fella, we had company,
Yeah.
and one fella says, if it would get such a flood that you would have water on your lawn, what would it be by the river? Well, I said, you wouldn't see their chimneys.
I don't know how much higher we are.
I think it's about 16 feet from our house to the river down.
Wow.
16
That much
feet.
difference.
Yeah, I know, I'd have to move.
You'd have to move.
Joanne, why don't you take that chair?
This is fine, I'll supervise here.
All
Bob
set?
can sit in that chair.
No, I'm
You said any?
Yep.
Okay.
I let it run a little to get past that.
Okay. Well, we're visiting with George and Evelyn Kounovsky and their home, which is northeast of Forest. And maybe what we could do is to start off about some of your background, where your parents came from, and how you ended up in this place. Evelyn, would you like to start? Where did your folks come from, and where did you grow up?
Well, my folks came from, Naval and Portland and Hatton. But my grandparents came from Norway, some of them. And then they moved to Iowa first, and Portland. Another set moved to Mayville.
Did you have relatives playing on that championship basketball team then?
No.
No?
No.
When you grew up then, what church did you belong to?
To the church by Hatton.
By Hatton?
Mayville and Hatton are terribly close.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
Give us the
Lutheran church.
name
The Bethany Lutheran Church, and that was only about a mile and a half north of our place. So
Did you,
no, it wasn't even that far.
Yeah, it's about a mile.
would you sometimes walk then
Oh,
for
we always
confirmation or something?
walked,
You did?
and that's where we had our parochial school for 1 month a year
Uh-huh.
in the summer.
Tell me about this parochial school for somebody who'd never been in something like that. What do you mean by parochial school?
Well, we studied, the commandments and the Bible and that.
Uh-huh.
A teacher. And
One teacher for
one
all the
teacher
grades?
well, yeah, I suppose from first grade to 8th grade, usually when you go to school like that.
Sure. When would you start in the morning and how long would you go?
The same as another school day.
It was just
9
like-
in the morning till 4 in the afternoon.
Yeah,
And that was every day for 1 month.
and you would just study church stuff and
Just-
religion and
yeah,
Bible and
And
stuff
we
like
had
that.
to learn, the commandments and
Yeah.
all that.
Huh.
So, but I enjoyed that.
How about confirmation then? How old were you for confirmation?
I suppose 8th grade. Oh, very good, you're in 8th grade. Yeah,
So
that
around
age.
the 8th grade.
The teens,
Mhm.
yeah.
Were you confirmed there then at your church?
Yes, I was confirmed in Norwegian.
In Norwegian?
But I sure would have a hard time talking it now.
Yeah. How about then? Was it easy for you
Well,
then?
that's all we talked. Absolutely all we talked. Because I remember when I was going to start school, first grade, we had some relatives over, or some of my cousins were over. And I remember then we were talking, and they said, well, I suppose we have to start talking English now, because we were going to go to school,
Sure.
because evidently all we talked was Norwegian.
Yeah, sure. Why do you suppose if the school was in English, why did the church still stay in Norwegian?
Well, that was, they changed to English almost right after I was confirmed.
Uh-huh.
I mean, teaching school, the
Okay.
Crocodile School in English.
Was that hard for the congregation to shift from Norwegian to English? That's
I
quite a
don't-
change.
Yeah, but I don't think it was.
Uh-huh.
Not the way I remember it anyhow.
Yeah.
It seemed like it wasn't any effort.
Some of the older ones resisted, you know. They thought that it wasn't even the same, some of the older
Yeah.
ones.
I
But
read-
maybe it was because I was that age.
Mhm.
that
you
could
know,
be too.
I think it's easier for a younger person to change.
I remember one lady who said somewhere in that time, she said, you know, it's really too bad that they're changing this Lord's Prayer from Norwegian to English, because that's how Jesus prayed, was in the Norwegian. And
Well,
she was serious. I mean,
It was
she-
it was
she-
the old stand patters that didn't want to give up their
Yeah.
custom, you know. That was it.
Mhm. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same either in English or Norwegian. It's
Well,
just
sure.
that I don't know, so I would remember it in Norwegian anymore. If you don't hear it or talk it, you kind of forget it.
Yes, you do.
At least I do. But it wouldn't take long to, get on
Just
to it
like
again.
with me in Bohemian, you know. See, I used to talk it plain, but I haven't talked it for probably 75 years. I forgot a lot of it.
Sure. Now, was Bohemian talked by your parents and your community then too?
Mother was full-blooded Bohemian,
Uh-huh.
and Dad learned it. See, he could talk High German, Low German, and English, and Bohemian.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me more about your parents and your background, George.
Well, I can say that my dad, he was born in Czechoslovakia, in a town of Prague. And when he got of school age, his parents didn't think the schools in Czechoslovakia was very good. So he moved to Germany with a relative. And he went, they don't have high school there. That's 1 to 12 grades. And he stayed with them. And he started at grade 1, graduated grade 12 with a straight A. Then after he graduated from school, then Germany, they had compulsory military training. Well, he didn't think too much of that, so his parents told him, well, the best thing you can do is pack up and go to America and see what you can find. And so he did, and he landed in Chicago, and mother, she came from Bohemia, you know, and she landed in Chicago, and they got to know each other and got married, and Dad was a silver gilder. He could take a wooden picture frame, and he had sheets of pure gold and pure silver. He could put it on, and so then he heard of it. It was awful hard times in the 1890s in any town, and he heard about better wages in North Dakota. Well, they had relatives here, so he come out for the harvest and the threshing. Well, he liked it, and he stayed till he was 100 years and 2 days old.
103,
100 years and 2 days.
100 years and 2 days old.
He was just as spry, and he was giddy, and nurse would come in and kid him, you know, oh, come on, John, you gotta get going, we gotta get that 100th birthday. Oh, that's like nothing. The next day he refused to eat. 2 days more, and he was in the morning.
Oh, yeah, and he was in that athletic club too then.
Oh yeah, when he got to Chicago, he helped organize this athletic club. Bohemian is Sokol, S-O-K-O-L. And he helped organize it, and he went back for different years. Well, the last one he was there was the 75th. We got a picture of him standing, or what do you call it, podium. And he was telling them, I was here for the 10th, 15th, 25th, 50th, now it's 75, and I'm here again. When you have your 100, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up then?
I grew up, I was born in Chicago. But I grew up about 55 miles north of here, by Cummings, North Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you meet Evelyn then?
Well, they had a Carl Benhouse celebration in Hatton. And of course, Dad, he wanted to go, so a bunch of us went in the car.
I was waiting tables at our church service.
What was that,
Dinner.
in a church building then? A church, was
No, not in a church building, but the church
the church
know,
was serving the meals?
was
Oh,
serving the
okay.
meals, yeah.
Sure. Who was this guy, Carl what?
Carl
Carl
Ben
Ben
Evelyn.
Eilson. He was that great aviator. He
Explorer.
dared anything. He took off from Anchorage, Alaska. There was a ship froze in there, and they didn't have food. And he says to his co-pilot, well, let's go. And my golly, he didn't make it. They laid there till spring, and then of course they kept watching it, and then finally they seen his arm come out of the snowbank. Well, then he knew that the other fellow must be there someplace too.
Well, you remember Carl Ben Evelyn.
There's a memorial in Hatton there, right as you
Yeah.
come into town from the south side. Have a nice
And
memorial.
they've got a great big house there. That's all.
All antiques, or
Antique.
not antiques, but
Yeah, and then
views from him.
they had a celebration there a few years later. Her and I was there, and the MC said if anybody had anything good to say about Hatton. Well, I said I did. I said, and that's her here. And I says we got together. We're still together now, and that's over 50 years.
Well, now I'm curious, when you got married, where did you live and how did you end up down here?
I was home with Dad. Our dad hadn't left home. We got married in Fargo in June, and we stayed there the next year. Then the following spring, I rented a farm, Kelso. That's the next little town south, a mile east, and we lived there 10 years. And they had the Saffords, what we rented from, they had a son, and one day he was as nice you could make him. Next day he'd just bite your head off. And he, you know, the boys were 4 and 6 years old. They'd want to play. And oh gosh, so she couldn't take it. She says, you take the car and you go to Fargo and see what you can find. And I come to Fargo and found this, and they showed it to us. And first they showed me a farm 2 miles south of Fargo. And I said, well, the wife's got to okay this too. Next morning, 7 o'clock, Smith, L.E. Smith, called up and says, hey, he says, you can't have that farm. I says, well, they showed it to me. Well, he said, that's my farm. So they says, we got another farm. You come down and we'll show you. So they showed us this, and here we are.
When was that you moved down here then? Your boys were 4 and 6?
Let's see, you folks came
43.
yeah, we came in the fall of 42. We bought it in 41, but it was in March already, and the renter was already in the field, so we stayed that year at Kelso and moved down here in the fall.
What do you remember about moving and the people that you met? Who were some of the first people you got to know down here, and what was that like to move down here?
Well, I didn't know anybody, but I was in Horace one Saturday, and I met A.M. Johnson, that's Wilford's, Milford's dad. And he says, asked me if I was the new man on the Leon farm. I said, yes. He bid me welcome, and I thanked him. And he says, what church do you go to? Well, I says, my wife's been a Lutheran all her life, and I've been on the other side of the fence for 28 years. So, and I wasn't much of a member of that. Well, he says, come to church tomorrow. Oh no, I says, we're strangers here and we don't know nobody. You come to church and we'll bid you welcome. So, next day we dressed up and went, and we've been there ever since. And I wasn't never confirmed, so they had an adults class on Margaret, Nelvin, Mrs. John Rusted, and I. Galvin done the works. So I was confirmed in the Horace Lutheran Church.
Well, I think the neighbors around here were really nice too. They came and visited us,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Like
strangers.
Who are some you remember that were good about
Well,
that?
especially Bee Bernberg. I know she was one of the first ones that came over.
Yeah.
And maybe that was because her sister and her husband had been living in this house at the time we bought it. So that is how we got acquainted with them in a way.
Sure would be an Oscar.
Yeah. It would be Bee's sister that related to them. So that was the name. And the Lovers, they were good. And then of course it was Beaches. They had just moved in too, hadn't they?
No, a few years before us.
Yeah.
That's what Jim
They
did.
were some of the first ones that came over.
Sure.
So we really have had nice neighbors.
That means a lot.
It sure does.
New place. Now, I'm very curious and would like to find out your impressions of this church when you came here. Evelyn, you've been in a Lutheran church all your life, and what was it like for you to come from up north and then join a new bunch here where you didn't know anybody?
I don't know, it worked fine. I don't remember that I had any difficulty.
After we put in a few Sundays going to church there, people flocked around us, talked to us as though we'd been there for years, so we felt we were welcome.
Yeah. How about for you, George, coming from a Roman Catholic background, what did you notice that were some things different and some things the same about the Lutheran Church, and especially this one?
Well, it's the Catholics, they carry on different, you know. Of course, I suppose we only have one God, but then they well, I don't know how you'd say it, but they worship a little different, you know. Yeah. I could tell you a lot about it, but I ain't going to.
No, but now, like when we lived at Kelso, the community around there, that was mostly Catholic. And I know they would have doings in their church there, and we'd go there, you know, once in a
Oh,
while.
yes, when we lived at Kelso in 10 years, by the Catholics, we were treated royally. They had dances in the church basement and that, you know. We was never left out. No, we
So
always,
they were always,
That's interesting. You had dances in the church basement.
Mhm.
I wonder how that would go over.
Not so pretty good here, I guess.
you know, but there's nothing wrong in it.
Nothing
At least
wrong.
I don't think so.
No, but I was thinking, for the Haugies, that would,
Oh,
that would be
oh,
pretty upsetting, wouldn't it? For the
Yeah.
Haugian background was kind of against dancing, I think,
oh.
weren't they?
Card playing, anything.
Is that right? No card playing either?
Yeah, you were doomed, I tell you.
I think when you play cards or dance or something, it's what you think.
Yes. I got a kick out of my old pastor, you know. He grew up in that time too, where there was all that stuff going on. And he said one time we went to a meeting with all the preachers from around, and the guy got up and said, "How many of you play with these terrible, sinful face cards?" And everybody kept their hand down. "And how many of you enjoy playing a good game with these nice games, cards for rook?" You know, and there was no face card. Everybody rose their hand. You know. And the guy said, "You bunch of phony hypocrites." He said, "It doesn't matter whether you're playing rook or some other game. Cards are cards, and it's what's in here
Sure.
and what you think.
Yeah.
It's what
You
you
know,
think.
it's what you think." He said.
Sure.
He said it isn't. He said that isn't sin. He said, and then he went in to talk about what sin really is. You know, about separation from God and the love of Christ bringing us back together and how we're
Yeah.
free to live life. Yeah, but that's interesting. I went to a picnic one time, and you know, the Missouri Synod, they're kind of different approach to things too. But we had a church picnic, and the church I'd served was an old Lutheran Free ELC Haugie background, and here were these Missouri Synod people. And they had a keg of beer and all kinds of stuff out there for their picnic. Our people thought that was just terrible. That at a church picnic they'd be drinking beer.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, that,
You know. You know. Well, now, you were when you were confirmed here, George, did they have any special ceremony you had to go through or anything? And how long did you go to these classes?
It was 2 months.
Uh-huh.
Well, how many were in that class?
Well, it was Margaret and Alvin and I and Mrs. John Lewis, 4 of us.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we just had they took us into the church. Dalton said his piece and we said ours and we were there.
Yeah.
All you really answered to was the creed, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. That's what we do now, pretty
Yeah.
much, too.
Yeah.
So.
You know, I got the honor, my folks, of course, they were Catholic. I got the honor of converting them to Lutherans when they were 86 and 78 years old.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Mother wanted to transfer, but she was afraid she never could memorize anything. And she was afraid, so I got the Severide
Oh,
from
yeah.
Hillsborough.
Yeah.
And we went out and talked to her. And he says, you stay with me and I'll give you 2 lines to memorize. And I'll guarantee you that's all you have to do. And when they were taken into church, there was about 10, 12 young folks going down the aisle. My dad and mother came behind.
Were you there that day?
Oh, you bet I was there.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah.
No, I had a hard time talking him into it. Dad, he didn't like to give in, but I finally got him. So I felt kind of proud of myself being that, bringing a couple in that old.
Yes. When you came here, Evelyn, did you get involved with the ladies group then in the ALCW anyway?
It seems like right away.
Uh-huh. Can you tell me what you remember about the ladies group at the time you started and any changes you've noticed since then? What did you do? What were the meetings
I've got
like?
4 memories. First that goes.
Well, that's right.
But, no, we had our ladies' aid, you know, that we used, I think it was maybe once a month or something like that. Maybe not that often, but anyhow, it was,
According to that picture postcard you got, you must have had a membership of about 25 people, ladies in that ladies' aid,
Yeah.
here in the country.
Oh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, we got a postcard that's full of ladies standing just as close as they could.
Now, was this a group that met in your homes then?
Yes, they went from different farms.
Uh-huh.
See that picture,
yeah.
that postcard you got, wasn't
Was that the ladies' aid?
Yeah, wasn't that taken on Carlson's place?
Yes. It was. But that was most of the people around here.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the leaders, any of the gals who were?
Well, most of them were from around Horace, that's all I guess, you know,
Sure.
I forget. The Holmans, you know. And I suppose the Brinks.
Imagine.
But I know we had our ladies' aid all the time. And then after a while it got to be groups, I believe, or something. And now it is what?
Probably have circles.
Circles.
Yeah.
But it's practically the same thing as far as I understand it.
How
But our
about,
last circle was, the ones that belonged to this last circle were really just the ones right around here, us older ones.
uh-huh. Can you name who that would be? The ones you remember, Evan?
Yeah, it would have been Inga Lobert and Ella Biori and Lee Fernberg, Alice Grant, and myself.
Alice McMahon comes sometimes.
Yes,
too.
Alice McMahon.
I see. And what would you gals do then when you got together?
Well, we usually had a lesson, you know, and then lunch.
Okay, sure.
And then it seemed like every year we'd have, like, say, a Christmas party, when the husbands were invited.
I bet that was kinda nice.
Yes, we did it.
We'd bring a Christmas present,
Yes.
and we'd line them up,
exchange
put
presents.
numbers on them, and they'd come and take it, and you'd draw one out. The number you drew out, that's the gift you got.
Oh.
Sometimes you got your own.
And we'd all furnish something towards the meal.
Okay, so it's kind of a potluck meal.
It was a potluck.
That fellowship is good because you get to know each other better, I would guess, huh?
Yes, really.
Yeah,
I thought it was wonderful.
yeah, yeah, I'll bet it was too.
In fact, I kind of miss it in a way.
Yeah, sure. I know others have said too that the gals have an advantage over the men because on Sunday we're just together for worship and that's about it, maybe coffee afterwards. But the way you really get to know people is when you work with them in the kitchen
Yes.
or get together in their homes for a Bible study and visit and have coffee. That's how you get to know each other.
Yes.
Now there was a while, George, didn't they have a men's group here when do you remember anything to do with the men's group?
Well, we had brotherhood.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be.
Tell me what you remember about the brotherhood.
Well, we organized, we had some, I think it was 24 members, and we met once a month in church. And we always got 3 guys to serve the lunch. We had to have lunch, you know.
Good.
And then when Johnson came here, he's the one that killed it. He didn't want no brotherhood, so it just deteriorated. Yeah, I was president of the brotherhood for many years.
Well, you were president.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, what were some things you men did for fellowship or helping out?
Well, we'd sing songs, and then somebody had a lesson, and he'd read it, you know. And then we'd have our lunch and sit and visit.
Yep. Did you ever do projects to raise money?
Yes, we did. Do you remember when this accident was on the, I call it the Tingestow Bridge, before this one was put in, the old curved bridge, when that, I can't remember his name, he was a Jew, and he had bought meat. Anyway, he was killed down in this corner.
Oh,
And he had a teenage boy driving his van. And they had supposedly had stopped at the liquor store in Horace, and that was Francis Burnett had it. Well, anyway, then the Knudsen was the pastor, and he pushed the Brotherhood then to raise money to try to dry up Horace. Remember that? I was treasurer at the time, and I had to turn this money over. And I think Chris Toohey was the one that said money was no object at the time, so they raised money to try to dry up Horace, but I don't know, it didn't really work. They say, yeah.
yeah.
So we had to raise money that time, I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
When you say, Bob, to dry up Horace,
They wanted to close the liquor store.
so that it would be illegal to sell liquor or drink liquor in the area of Horace.
Because this teenager had been in the bar, and of course he was killed in this accident.
Then we used to have, once a year, every fall, we'd have an auction sale. People would bring in stuff, and then they'd buy stuff, take it home, bring it back next year, and I was the auctioneer.
Well, you were the
I
auctioneer?
was the,
Yes, that's one way we
That
raise
was
money,
the
the White
Brotherhood.
House.
Oh.
You bet, every year.
you know, best part of it was, we used to get this Idsoy, he was an auctioneer, you probably knew him up at Page. And he charged us $50 to run the auction. Well, we'd get in, the most we ever got in was, I think it was $185, and 50 to him, we had 130 left. So one year I said, say fellows, I says, I'm not much of an auctioneer, but I says, why not save that $50 and I'll do the auctioning. And so he came, and so he was madder than blazes because he didn't get to auction. Like, when we get through it, we took in $385. And I talked from 11 o'clock before noon till after 7 that evening. Next morning, I couldn't tell her to give me coffee.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
He got talked out.
You got talked
Oh,
out.
yeah, I auctioned many auctions in Horace.
Yeah.
We'd have them out outside, and if it wasn't fit, we have them in the basement.
You done it for the ladies' aid too.
Yes, yeah.
Now, the money that you raised would have what, for what purpose? What would you do with the money you raised?
Well, didn't we give it to the church?
Most of the time, it all went to the church.
Yeah.
To help out?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great.
The only project was to dry up horse that didn't work.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of different pastors. I'm curious, who are some of the pastors that you folks remember, and what do you remember about them?
Well, when we came here, that was right after Knotson went out. He was gone when we come. And Dalton came in. And he was here 22 years, wasn't he? And after him was Johnson, and then Marvin Keene. And who was after him? Stenberg?
Mm-hmm.
And then now you.
The time of Johnson is when St. John's merged with us.
Yeah, yeah. I got a picture, the last service in St. John's, I got in my car is on there. I picked it out. Yeah.
Well, how is that? Did you go over for that service?
Oh, yes, yes. We didn't have our service, and we all, see, they didn't have no, we took, our minister went over there.
Oh,
Yeah.
so at the time that it was closing, they had no pastor.
No, and so they had, Dermo was pastor out at St. John's for a while,
Uh-huh.
you know, or towards the end when they were going to close up.
Yes.
And then he would come to Horace then for a couple interchangeable services. And then Johnson came and Termo had left and they were planning on closing St. John's. Then we had interchangeable services, then occasionally.
Let me see if I understand this right. For a while, St. John's had a different pastor than Horace did because St. John's was hooked up with Christiania
Yeah.
and Norman.
Yeah.
And so they had their own pastor for a while.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the road then,
It was at the time we didn't have a pastor. Termo had a few services in Horace,
okay, and so then when Johnson came, he also served
both.
St. John's, Horace, and what other church?
Salem.
He also served Salem.
And yeah, Harwood had gone on their own. There's Dalton took Harwood. Yeah.
Okay, so then, then when the church closed the last day, everybody went out there for worship.
So yeah, we would just take alternate Sundays.
Oh, and when he was out.
When Johnson was here, so he had one Sunday he'd preach in St. Johnson, one in Horace. Then, see,
Okay.
as just kind of a smoother way of merging. See.
So everybody who belonged to Horace, when he was preaching out at St. John's, they'd all go out there.
Yeah.
And when he preached at
Horace.
in town, then all those at St. John's were to come in town. Okay.
And then they finally decided to close up.
You know, I'm sorry that I didn't buy one of those pews out of St. John's. They had curved pews.
They're still in the church. And
Oh, they still are in there. Oh,
Yeah,
I
they never
didn't know.
sold
Now, do you know, Bob, what become of that hanging?
I still the chandelier. It's in there.
No. I mean, in our church, what do you call that thing that hung on that side of the pulpit? The minister went up there. It's the same as I'm so poor at names.
The pulpit.
Yeah. What, you know that round one we had?
Yeah, that's up in Jim Lee's barn.
Oh, it is?
Mhm.
Oh,
Mhm.
I often wished I could have got hold of that and saved it. It was quite a relic.
Yes.
It was three steps up to it
Yeah.
when I was a youngster, and then I forget what minister it was that got it lowered to not too long, about halfway.
Well, that must have been high then.
You bet.
Huh?
You bet.
Way up in the air.
Well,
And
you
the
sat and
minister way
looked up
up
at
there.
it. Didn't make any difference where you sat in church. You could see the minister, you know.
Yeah. Huh.
And then finally it was lowered right so it was level with the that first step on the altar, the altar.
Uh-huh.
The altar, I don't know.
Huh.
Or it might have been up a little bit.
Yeah.
But then it stood on the west side.
Okay.
Now
And
the
then
pulpit is on the east side.
on the east side.
I got bawled out one time. I was elected to trim the Christmas tree. Well, they took it to the balcony and trimmed the top of it from the balcony down as far as they could reach. But this time they had it set up there and I couldn't reach it. And I put a newspaper, there was a velvet cloth on the top of it. And I stood on the top of that pulpit. And did Helen blow me out? I wasn't supposed to stand on that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a time when nobody but an ordained pastor got in the altar or the pulpit.
Yeah.
That was definite.
Is that right?
Event. Nothing but an ordained pastor. And I thought it was very funny, you know, they used to have the Christmas tree in the altar ring. See,
Oh.
the old altar, you know, was a circle.
Uh-huh.
It's in a circle right in front of the altar. And there, when we remodeled, we made the straight one now. And Christmas tree was in it, and it had candles on it. And then there'd be one man standing on each side of the Christmas tree for our Christmas tree program, we called it, with a wet sponge on the end of a bamboo pole that they could reach up and put out the candles as they burnt down low so there wouldn't be a fire.
So there were real candles on that tree.
Absolutely, yeah.
And real
We
fire.
didn't have
Yeah.
we didn't have electricity then, you know.
Why, sure. Huh.
Yeah, I know that these old Christmas trees with those candles, they had to be very careful so that they
There
don't
was a
start a fire.
fellow standing on either side then, you know, with a wet sponge on a bamboo stick where he could reach the top of the tree if he had to, you know.
That's interesting.
I thought it was funny then, you know, nobody should be in the altar, and here they had the Christmas tree. But of course, that was supposed to represent Christ, I thought then, you know, that would be fine. But then they filled it with gifts, we'd exchange gifts. Till some goofy gifts were given, and some got real expensive gifts, and other kids would just go out and get a pencil or something, you know.
Yeah.
So then some kids felt bad about this gift, you know.
So the gifts were exchanged by mainly the Sunday school children, I suppose?
Yeah, yes, no, grown-ups too.
Was that right?
So then Mrs. Roger Ellenson's grandfather, was the fellow that would read off their names, and then kids would act as ushers and bring the kids around.
When
We were
was-
always listening there with us, stretching our ear to see if he wouldn't call our name, you know.
When was this custom done, the gift exchange?
At our Christmas program, and that was usually second or third day of Christmas. And one night we'd be in Horace. If that was the second Christmas, the third day of Christmas we'd be at St. John's. Because St. John's was always short of kids, you know, so we'd probably be part of the program out there too.
Oh.
And whoever was lucky enough to be in the program, of course, got another gift. Maybe not so much, but it was a gift.
So you had no problem getting kids
No.
to volunteer for?
Well, yes, there were problems.
No?
No.
No.
I know I was in them quite often out there, and then in the school out there.
You've noticed, I imagine, quite a few changes in the community around here and in the church. What do you think were some big changes that really made a difference in our congregation or in our community? That you've noticed?
Well, one thing that made a big difference in the church was the heating system. I know that. We had coal in the corner and a big furnace there, and a couple of big ranges, and stoke them up with coal. The women would cook the coffee on it, and it didn't have much of a space in there till they moved the counter forward.
In terms of maybe shifting gears for a moment here and looking at a couple of other things. You folks have lived a pretty full, good life, and say if we had some young kids that are just kind of starting off now, in confirmation class, and you had a chance to talk to these young kids, what would you tell them, or what would you want them to think about as they're just kind of starting off their Christian learning and confirmation experience?
I don't know that she can answer, because you see, on the other side of the fence, there was nothing like that, Jim.
Yeah.
Didn't,
Well, I think that they should stay with their church, or at least keep going to church
Okay.
when they get, you know, if they leave that community or that, whatever church they, you know, belong to. I think that's pretty important to stay with it.
In light of that, I agree with you. I think that is very important. What would you say is important about belonging to a church like to Horace? What's important about that to you folks? Why are you glad you belong to Horace?
Well, it's kind of nice to hear the sermons, you know. And then it's, you know, you go to communion.
and once a week, you go to the house of the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
We don't get there once a week, but we get there once in a while.
You've been members here now about how long? Since 40-something, that's about 40 years.
42 years.
Yeah.
Well, we joined shortly after
Yeah,
we came in a way.
Yeah.
And we've been here 45.
So at least 40 years or so.
Oh, yes.
Members.
Because we had, you know, the two boys, and so we wanted them to get to church, and they were comfortable.
Based on that, if you were going to talk to somebody new, like you did 40-some years ago, just to start in on the church, what would you tell them that they should remember or know about this church to kind of encourage them to join? What would you like them to remember or to know about Horace that you think is good about the place?
Oh, I don't know what to say. Of course, I know one thing, that Horace's church is about as good as any.
I think that's a good thing to say.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always said that.
I think one thing I've appreciated, we've only been here a couple of years, but what I like about our church are the people. I think we've really got some great people here. Good ideas, they care, they want to do things. And I would say to anybody who would be joining them, you bet we're as good as any other church, because we've got some great people here. That's a lot to offer.
You're talking to the oldest member of the church.
Is that right?
Are you sure he was the oldest?
Pretty sure.
Huh. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Mabel Johnson is 1 year older.
Who?
Mabel Johnson, she was born
Oh.
in April 1st of 1897.
Oh,
So you'd be the oldest member
Yeah.
right around here then?
yeah,
That's
I
something.
see snowflakes.
Be the oldest man.
Yeah.
yeah.
He'd be the oldest. Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, Miss Mabel, she's kind of like this. I stopped in at Arthur to see her one time, but she insisted I was Milford, and that was it.
Yeah, yep. She kind of forgets sometimes, doesn't
Oh, I had talked to Milford about 2 weeks ago, and I asked him if it'd do me any good to stop and see her. No, he says, just wasting your time. She don't even know me. Sometimes I go there, and she don't even say a word to me. She don't, I don't know you.
Yeah.
I know when I was there to see her, and I told her who I was, and I said I was from Horace. Oh no, she says, I've been there at Horace a long time, but she says there never was a Kounovsky in the Horace church.
Yep. Yep. I stopped to visit her one time too at Arthur, and it wasn't a good day for her.
No.
She had a hard time kind of trying to understand what was going on. And that happens sometimes.
Oh, yes. There's a lady in there, Edna Laris is her name. She was from Hillsborough, where I was for quite a while. And she's got this, what do you say, Alzheimer's?
Oh, yeah.
And she's just as good as you or I, and she remembers while you're talking to her, but 5 minutes afterwards, she don't know if she ever said it.
That's right. Yeah, it's a mysterious illness. That really is a tough one. One other thing I wanted to be sure to ask you folks before I forget. I don't know quite how to say this, but as you look at your faith and what you believe, what's very meaningful to you at this time in your life? Just the fact that you know about your faith and what you believe, what Jesus has taught, and what you believe about Jesus and the Bible and stuff. What is it that gives you comfort or that you like about your faith right now that's important to you? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay.
Well, the main part is to go to church and believe in the Bible and the minister and different things. And if you believe in it, you'll go to your resting place in peace.
Okay.
And I think it's nice to be able to go to communion.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with you there. I know our kids, when we're talking about this, their confirmation class, 7th and 8th graders, I was wondering if they felt we were having communion too often, twice a month. And they said no, and they said it means so much to us, we think we ought to have it every Sunday. You know, they really like communion, and so they would agree with you that they like it.
Oh, yeah.
It's nice.
But there was one time about talking about communion. It seems to me like when I was growing up, I I don't know where I got the idea, but I thought it was only these people that were perfect that were supposed to go to communion.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
And I was never perfect,
Yep. Yep.
but I
was
finally
in all of it.
decided I could go to communion too.
Yes. Yep. And communion is really kind of a place for those who aren't perfect.
Well, yeah, now I understand it, but
Yeah.
there was a little time there that I thought, well, it's really only these people that are really
It wasn't
good that
just
should
the
go.
Horace Church then, they were all over, huh?
Yeah. Well, there was a time in Horace too, wasn't there, Bob, when the congregation, when they had communion, wasn't too often, and those who went weren't too many?
Not very many,
Yeah.
not very many. Those that felt they were fit to go, I guess.
Yeah, see,
And they were
that was
very
probably
old
what,
people.
yeah,
I considered old anyway, at my age.
That's a big change in our lifetime, isn't it, about communion, where, I can remember it wasn't more than once, twice, 3, 4 times a year
That'd be about 3 or 4 times, that's
that
right.
we'd have communion. Probably, what, Christmas?
Easter, Pentecost, and what was the other one?
Maybe Reformation or
Something like
something
that,
out
yeah.
there in the fall again.
3 or 4 times a year at a time.
yeah, that's what I remember too. It wasn't very often.
No.
Yeah.
So one of the changes is that we now in our congregation here, we have it twice a month, first and third Sundays. So that's quite a change. Then another change in communion is that I can remember as a child, I could not go up with my parents. Just those who received communion would go up. And now the whole family can kind of go together. And I like that. I think that's a good change.
But communion, it seemed like at our church anyhow, you didn't go to communion until after you were confirmed.
Yeah.
Or when you were confirmed.
Yeah, that's another
was the
change,
first time.
isn't it? That's
Yeah.
another change, that your first communion was always after you were confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Do you remember what the wafer was way back then? I can't, it wasn't the same little wafer like we have now, was it? And I just can't remember
It
what,
seems to be it was.
it was the same as now?
I think so.
Maybe.
That's the way I remember it.
Maybe. But then we had the common cup
Yes.
to start with.
That's right.
Is that right? That was for you too?
Yes.
The one cup,
The one
everybody,
cup that-
everybody drank from the same cup?
I remember the time Johnson tried that in the basement, and the cup come to Mrs. Bobby Benson. Boy, she polished that cup before she took a drink.
No, but to begin with, you always came up to the altar, and the minister held the cup, and of course he would wipe it.
Oh,
That's
yes.
the way I remember it anyhow. But see, it was something else we tried out in the Horace Church.
I
And
don't know,
do
was
you
it
remember that?
Johnson, was Johnson here when we'd have, what was that up? When we had, sunrise services and we'd go in the basement, and then they'd break bread and have communion, and the
Yeah.
cup was passed from one to the other.
Mhm.
Oh, and then each person would pass it to the other
Yeah,
person.
and then we broke off a chunk of bread, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who was pastor then when we were doing that?
I'm trying to think, probably it was Pastor Keen.
I think so.
Do you know where Pastor Keen is now?
It's up by Red Willow.
Red
Inford.
Binford?
He has 3 churches, doesn't he?
Yes.
Oh,
He was a good minister.
He had a very interesting mother-in-law too. We had a lot of fun with her.
Oh, tell me more about her. What do you mean?
Well, Pastor Keen's wife sang in the choir, and of course the mother-in-law, when she stayed here, she came and sang in the choir.
Well, she didn't live here though.
Not
She
all
just
the time.
came to visit.
She came.
Uh-huh.
And she was very interesting. Lots of life.
Huh.
Lots of life.
Yeah.
Yeah, she'd talk Norwegian to me. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know where they get it in their head that I'm such a good Norwegian. I can still read Norwegian. I went to Sunday school in Norwegian, of course.
You're all right then, as long as you can read it.
That is if it's in, well, American type I call it, but if they get it in this fancy Norwegian type, then I'm stuck.
Yeah, the alphabet looks different.
Yes.
That's the same thing with Bohemian, you know. You write it as it sounds. You know, it ain't like English alphabet. You write, sometimes add some letters. That you write it exactly as it sounds.
Makes it easier then.
Ja, that means I. That's why I. Ja, půjdu do města. I am going to town.
Yeah.
Gista then was town, huh?
Huh?
Gista then was town, huh?
Ja, miesta.
Miesta. Oh, okay.
Miesta.
Yeah.
M-E-S-T-A, miesta. Yeah, that just like that egg I got up there, you know. Gosh, that time I went down, I had 10 cents in my pocket, and I tell you, I had money.
Joanne, can you think of anything else that you forgot to talk about?
No, I think that covers it.
Well, I want to thank you for letting us come and visit again about all this stuff.
Oh, we're glad you came.
Appreciate
Like
it
I
very
told you,
much.
yeah, when you was here last time, if you're ever out driving, just kind of killing time, that road leads here.
That's good. And you give me a call anytime another skunk or